Is that where God creates the law that people abide by? Where do you see that? Well, the Bible, but have you seen like governments, nations do that? Have nations actually done that? Like, not, they still do. There are still countries that use religious law, right, as their basis, right? That's called a theocracy. A theocracy is where you have law. Your law code is based off of religious law, right? There's a reason why the United States doesn't have a theocracy, right? We don't pick a specific religion is the government's religion or the country's religion, right? We're a mix of a bunch of different religions, okay? But there are countries out there that are theocracies, people that say, well, the whatever law code of the Quran or the Ten Commandments, right? That is what we abide by, okay? So that's what we call a theocracy. So it's kind of a mix. So there could be a group of people, right? A small group of people, whoever's in charge, a single leader is in charge, or you can even have examples of God themselves, okay? Or just based on religion. Who should be able to enforce the laws? What do you think of that one? Who should be able to enforce? Say, trusted people like who? Yeah, all right. We select people that their sole job is to enforce the law. Right? And there's a reason why we do that, right? Because if anyone can just enforce the law, then some people might just take advantage of it, right? There's a reason why we have these things called vigilante laws. Right? Vigilante laws are basically laws that say an average Joe just can't take the law into their own hands, right? We have a select group of people that do that. And you can even look at it today, what's going on, where there are people that are doing it for, even if they have if they believe they have just reasons for it, you still can't do it because it's a vigilantism. The idea that you're going to take the law into your own hands because you're a private citizen. We have cops that do that. That's their job. That's what their main priority is to do, is protect the people, enforce the laws, right? So that's a big thing. That who should enforce the laws? Now, we do have aspects where we have like citizens arrests. We do have things like that, right? Where people kind of they arrest if they see someone that's breaking the law and they think you can stop them in order to help law enforcement. That does happen, right? But there's that mix of what is the right situation for that to happen, right? And we see that a lot today. Okay, are all laws and rules fair? Well, explain. So what was a unfair law? What do you think? Give me an example. Yeah, left. An ice cream cone in your pocket. Well, it could be like is it like have to be in the bag? Like you know how they have some like like ice cream cones are in like those I don't know, like store brand like ice cream cones. I don't know. I don't know. I haven't heard that one before. I thought it would be like in Florida. Usually Florida has some of those weird like laws that happen, but any other laws, right? So the law is unfair. Does anyone know of any law that's unfair that maybe New York State has that you might disagree with? Anything? No? What about school code? What about school code? Is there a school code that you disagree with? I won't tell. I won't tell. All of them. Oh, jeez. Rebel over here. Going rebellion over here. So now that kind of ties into our next one. So if a law or rule is unfair, what should happen? What should happen? What should occur? Yeah. Good. What do you call that in United States terms? Do you know the term for that? Yeah. Well, the president can veto a law, right? That's where he stops it from being passed. But there's another part, yeah. I don't think so. What happens is the relationship between the citizens and the representatives is what we kind of abide by. So it's really on the representatives, like the senators and House members, to kind of make sure the laws that are passed are intertwined with what the people want, right? So I don't think we can just say, no, I'm not doing that law, and then we all kind of just vote and then they cancel the law. It has to be done in Congress or with the House and Senate. But I was thinking what you kind of mentioned was this thing called judicial review. Is an idea where a law gets passed, and before it's finally passed, the Supreme Court looks at it and says, is this fair? Right? And they say, if it's fair, if it's constitutional, is what they say, then it's good to go. But if it's not, then it can't be law. So that's a very, very common thing to say. We should have it discussed. What's other ways? What else could happen? We discuss it, we review it, talk about it. What's the other options? Yeah? Take it to court. These are all peaceful. Protest, riot. What's the other one? What's the worst thing that could happen? Say? Looting. Well, it goes with the rioting sometimes. What else? The worst thing that could happen when you hate a law. Rebel. That's like the end. Like that's like the no going back, right? There's rioting. It's like, all right, I'm angry. We're protesting really aggressively. That's rioting. But then you got rebellion. Like rebellion is like we're declaring that we're done and we're throwing over the government. That's like the last resort, right? Yeah. In the Revolutionary War, right? These are all. That's the point. And understand. The Revolutionary War didn't just say, well, I hate the taxes. Time to go, Britain. It took time. Like, at first, they were trying to, discuss it. They're like, listen, let's try to make a compromise here. They're like, no. All right, well, listen, here's an olive branch petition. Here's what we think should happen. No. Okay, and let us rule ourselves. No. Time for rebellion. It kind of got to that point, it built up to the point where they had rebellion. So, these are all great options. So when you take a look at when a law is unfair, there's a lot of things you can do. Okay? All right, so make sure you have that submitted for the discussion. And we'll take a look. Let's jump to the PowerPoint. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about Mesopotamia. Right? Did you guys see my update about the quiz we're having this week? You guys saw that? You know what's coming? Okay. So quiz, guys, is going to be Thursday. For you guys, it'll be Thursday. The other classes will be Friday. You guys will have separate quizzes, so it's not like one group will know more than the other group. You'll have separate quizzes. It's going to cover prehistory, and it's going to cover the first section of this. Okay? So prehistory, all the things we talked about last week, and the first section of this. So what you learn about today is the last thing you'll learn about for the quiz. There's Thursday. Yep. Chapter 1 and the first part of this, the thing we'll talk about today. Okay? All right. So let's get started. Okay? All right. So, as I mentioned, last time we were here, we really talked about the birth of civilization, right? We talked about how people were starting to gather and more, and these small villages turned into cities, and these cities turned into civilization, okay? And the four major civilizations we're going to talk about are, let's just transition here, are going to be first Mesopotamia, which is the first thing we're talking about, that's the last thing before your quiz. We have Egypt, we have China, and we have the Indus River Valley, right? Those are the four that we're going to focus on. I gave you a little timeline here to talk about really the context of when everything's going on. But these are the four major groups, and we're going to focus on this one first. Okay? Huh? I'll get to this. So if you check Schoology, right, there should be a file that says, if you click on chapter 2, it says this one right here. Okay, so if you want to download this, I have this up while I go through it. And on the bottom, it has a little notes section. You can type in extra notes, right? That are available to you. Right. So, as I said, these are the big four. Let me just get this ready. Okay. All right, so we're talking about Mesopotamia first. So really to set the stage here for you guys, as I mentioned already, that farming really starts to develop big time. And they always are the most dense populations at this point in time happen to be where these major rivers occur. And one of the first ones, Mesopotamia, is located along the Tigris and Euphrates River. Now, what I did for you guys is give you a modern-day map of what the area kind of looks like. It really starts out in modern-day Iraq, okay? So the Fertile Crescent kind of starts here and goes here. That's kind of what modern-day the Fertile Crescent looks like. And Mesopotamia kind of encompasses these areas. It does expand even a little bit more, but we'll get to that part. All right. So the Fertile Crescent itself, by looking at the name, what is the Fertile Crescent? The Fertile Crescent. What is the Fertile Crescent? Yeah. Yeah, the land is fertile, and it looks like a crescent. Crescent of land that is fertile, right? That's what the Fertile Crescent is, right? It's the most dense. The soil is the most dense, perfect for farming, has the most nutrients in it, and this is technically the birth of farming civilizations, right? Some people will say no, it's the Indus River Valley. Some people say no, it's China. Some people say it's Egypt. No, it's the Fertile Crescent. Most historians say this is the start of the farming civilizations. Okay, now the Mesopotamia name itself is called that because it's named the land between two rivers, right? And the two rivers, Tigris and Euphrates, are extremely important for this area just because they are the sole reasons why they survived, right? What's interesting about this area is that the surrounding areas, other than the rivers and the fertile area, the Fertile Crescent itself, is very barren, as in there's not a lot of resources that they can use. So they really have to rely on these rivers. Now, the important thing to understand about this area and the rivers themselves is the flooding that happens every year is very unpredictable. What does that mean? Well, if the river floods too much, it literally will destroy any town, village that's in its path. If it floods too little, then a lot of people will starve because the crops will not grow as much as they would like, right? So it's very unpredictable. It's hard to manage these two rivers. However, what people start to realize is that as time progresses, they start to understand how to adapt to their environment, which is what you guys had done yesterday. You looked at the way in which people adapt, right? And one of the biggest ways that they adapt, especially in these areas, was to create irrigation systems, right? Irrigation systems are really important because no matter if it floods too much or too little, they can find a way to gain some water to help these even far out villages. Because I mentioned to you, imagine you had to bring the water by foot. You know how difficult that would be? Having to carry pails upon pails of water all the way to the village, and then you have to do that every single day. That'd be extremely difficult, and it's not a life worth living, right? So they create these irrigation systems to help them in this process. Now, these irrigation systems didn't just show up, right? And they didn't just pay the workers to work them or make them. They ended up bringing in a lot of slave labor in order to make this stuff. So there was a negative component that came along with this. Now, as civilization started to develop amongst all the different city-states of the area, they realized that they have so many different riches and resources that they now have to defend themselves against nomadic groups that are trying to take all the material from them. So what they do is they build defenses. They build these big walls to defend their city. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, when population increases and a stockpile of crops increases, they try to trade for new things, right? So not only are they building irrigation systems, they have defensive barriers for against nomadic groups, but they're trading with as many people as possible, using the rivers as transportation and other means as well. So now these civilizations, these city-states are growing more and more prosperous, right? They're getting richer and richer, okay? Now, as people start to kind of get richer and richer, and there's more population, you now need to kind of organize everyone in a specific structure or a social structure so that everyone knows who has more power, who is on the higher scale of the pyramid, the social pyramid. And this starts to happen, pretty quickly. And one of the things that happens in the beginning was as religion develops, the leader at the very top of the pyramid were the priests. Right? And these priests were up there because they were seen as the person that was talking directly to their gods, right? And they were very polytheistic. What does polytheistic mean? If you're a polytheistic religion, yeah, you believe in many gods, right? So if Christianity, what type of religion is that? It's one God, so they're monotheistic, meaning one. Poly means you believe in many, many gods, more than just one. Okay? So that's the difference between the two. So they're a very polytheistic religion. Just like you look at the ancient Greek religion, mythology. What are they? Polytheistic, right? Because they have many upon many gods that they believe in, right? But as I mentioned, the priests become the leaders of this group because they are the sole people that speak to the gods. However, that power does change pretty quickly. All right? As the power or the prosperity of these city-states grow and grow and grow, the military leaders who have been defending these places from nomadic groups trying to take all their riches realize that maybe they can do the job better than the priests can. Because they're the ones defending the city-states, and they can then become the religious, communicators for the people as well. So they take over as really the leaders of these city-states. Now, as I mentioned already, city-states, guys, there's a lot of them. City-states are very similar to what our states are like today. They have their own local governments, right? They have their own structure of how their laws work, but they're all under the same banner of the United States of America. Similar to this aspect. They have all these different city-states. They're still under the banner of Sumerian civilization, okay? When the military leaders take over, they end up creating what we know as dynasties. Dynasties are the idea that if one person passes on, passes away, the power that they have, they relinquish to their oldest son, okay, or their a family, someone that's along a family tie, okay. And this kind of jumpstarts a long, long reign of dynasties that do occur, right? Now, I mentioned this last time. I kind of copied the slide and kind of used it again when we talked about Sumer for the first time. It was yesterday, right? The idea that as trade progresses and these city-states get bigger and bigger, their connections to other groups create cultural diffusion, okay? Cultural diffusion, pretty quickly, is the idea that different ideas or cultures are spreading from one group to another, right? And I use the idea of McDonald's, right? The burger looks different in one place, but McDonald's go across the world, and now they kind of have their own spin on, what a McDouble looks like, right? Same thing with sports. If, we got the idea of a football from rugby, right? We took the idea of rugby and we changed it, and now it's football, American football. Then we have baseball. Take the idea from cricket, change it, now it's baseball, right? Same thing happens with that. Now, as the important thing that happens is as religion gets larger and larger, we end up trying to create ways to honor the gods. And the reason why this happens is because with many, many gods in their belief system, the Sumerians believe that they're not really, that they're really powerful enough that they could smite thee if they dishonor them, right? For instance, if there's a giant flood that occurs, wipes out a whole village, they believe it's because the god had forced the flood to destroy them, and that they must have angered the god in some way. So what they do is they create these things called ziggurats, right? Ziggurats are basically temples, but then they aren't just temples. They actually have areas for storage of a lot of goods that they have access of. And I mentioned this in yesterday's lesson as well. I did mention ziggurats. But ziggurats are really important for the Sumerian civilization, okay? And as I mentioned already, when you look at the social pyramid that ends up being created, the kings and priests are on the top because their connection to the many different gods. Then you have the more harder, not, well, in their eyes, the harder jobs, which is less people in it, the traders, the craftsmen, the artists, people that make the pottery, right? Those are all in the wealthy merchants category over here. And then you have the people that are the farmers, which is majority of the population, right? That most workers do that are free, okay? And then at the very bottom here are the slaves. And I do add a little thing here that talks about how the slaves were not just people that were brought over like forced labor, but even people that were trying to pay off a debt, right? We call that indentured servitude, where people are paying off a debt, and then once they pay off the debt, they can buy their freedom back. Right, so it's a mixture of two different things. Some of the different innovations that these people make are, pretty incredible for the time period. But probably the most important one in my eyes is the system of writing. Because now, with system of writing, we have a start to actual history. Right? Not saying that the stuff we learned wasn't history, but that was what we call prehistory. Prehistory, the time before written record. So when we start seeing cuneiform, right? They use it for many different reasons. Obviously, to write stories, to collect taxes, to record trade. Now we have an account of all these different things. Now, unfortunately, Sumerian language was pretty complicated, right? And it was difficult to really decipher for a very, very long time. And we do try to get a sense, but it's still difficult to this day, okay? So, So to look at now the change and how the Sumerians lived. Sargon of Akkad was one of the biggest nomadic groups. He was leading one of the biggest nomadic groups of the time. Okay? And as I mentioned to you, as those city-states got more prosperous, they were trying to defend themselves against nomadic tribes or nomadic groups that were trying to take away their wealth. Sargon was one of the leaders of those groups. He ended up defeating majority of all of the city-states, and now combined all of them, creating really a empire. So now, instead of it being kind of a collection of city-states that kind of ruled on their own, now they became one entire group, all bowing to Sargon. Okay? Now, the relationship between them is a little different. What Sargon did was he had given them the ability to basically survive as long as they pay tribute to him. Now, what is tribute? What does tribute mean? Pay tribute, yeah. Well, praise, but it's mainly money, right? You gotta pay money. If you pay me money, you're good. You can live. That's basically what they would do. So he basically took over, made sure they knew that he was the big dog. Pay me money, you're all good. What's interesting, though, is that the relationship between the two was that he ended up gaining a lot of the culture that was already there. As in, his group didn't have really a defined culture. They didn't have a defined language. They didn't have a defined, religion. So when he took over those places, he adopted their religion, adopted their culture, and it was kind of like a cultural diffusion of sorts. Okay? Now, interestingly enough, the next person that leads is probably the most famous. His empire, the Babylonian Empire, under Hammurabi, becomes probably the most prosperous of the time. Okay? Now, the empire does grow extremely large. As you can tell here on this map down here, remember, it only started out pretty small, and now the green area is what he controlled. When he took over, he saw that the way that Sargon's dynasty had treated the people for so long, that they kind of got really angry at him. It was almost the same relationship happened where the people were treated so badly, and the laws are always so unfair, that every time there was a nomadic group that was trying to take over the area, a lot of the citizens were kind of begging them to do it because they were treated so horribly. They're trying to say, like, listen, take over, put away the bad leader, and then you guys can be the leader, right? So Hammurabi saw this. So when he took over this very large empire that he controlled, he realized that he needed to do something in order to keep all those people in line. So what do you think he did? famously? Yeah. Yeah, the famous law code that we all know of, Hammurabi's Code, right? And Hammurabi's Code, well, we're going to jump into that like right now, is kind of covers all aspects of life. It doesn't just say like, all right, well, you can't break the law, can't like, rob a bank. It really goes into social aspect, the relationship between husband and wife, slave and owner, goes into what laws you can't break when it comes to money, even farms, goes into everything, okay? So let's jump into that now. Go to the Hammurabi's Code worksheet I posted for you guys, and then we'll get started on it. Yeah, it's on Schoology.
They were considered wealthy.
Impressive, right? Yeah, look. I think they do have fragments of them, not completely in its entirety. But remember, they were placed most likely throughout the empire, right? Throughout the entire, because if they only posted in one spot, it's almost like the idea is if I talk about the homework in one period and then I don't tell you about the homework and then I expect you to do it. You know what I mean? It's like they have to place it throughout the empire, or else one group might say, "Oh, I don't know." But one of the issues they found was that there were people that couldn't even read. So that was a problem with the law code itself. Was that if you're going to make sure everyone knew the law code, you have to make sure that everyone knows what it means before you can, enforce it. But that's what they did. So let's take a look at the first one. Who wrote the Code of Hammurabi? Specifically, technically, he made the law, right? But the scribes wrote it. So yeah, so you can say Code of Hammurabi made the law, right? And he was given the power to do so by the god, right? The main god. But the scribes specifically wrote it, technically wrote it. He wrote it. He told them what to write. The scribes wrote it, right? He told them what to write. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at the next one. When was the Code of Hammurabi written, and where was the Code of Hammurabi written? The when and the where. What do we see? What do we got for this one? Yep. Good. So the when, right, guys, should be right here, right? 1754 BC, right? We talk about the where. Where was it written? Yeah, Aaron. Yeah, on a steel monument, right? They wrote on a steel monument. All right, what type of source is the Code of Hammurabi? Between the primary or secondary, what is it? Well, it's a primary, right? Because it's written, right? It's written during that time period. Now, granted, if you look at it in a, you're like, well, it's a primary source. I'm trying to think of a way it could be secondary. It's really a primary because it's written during the time. Usually secondaries are better suited for when you like read someone describing an account, right, of something else. Like if someone wrote an article about Hammurabi's Code, that'd be a secondary. Okay, so this would be considered a primary. Okay, where was the Code of Hammurabi placed, and why was it placed there? Where was it placed? Yeah. Yeah, public place, right? Make sure everyone can see it, because if people didn't see the law, then how are they expected to abide by it, right? I kind of made the example about the homework, right? If I didn't even tell you about the homework, but I told certain people about the homework, and then I'm like, why didn't you do the homework? Because I didn't see it. Well, you should have maybe done it, You can't expect people to do that, right? They have to be able to know. You have to tell them what you need them to do. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at the code itself. This is probably the best part of the worksheet, where we basically take a look at all the aspects of the Hammurabi Code, and we try to understand the reasons why they posted certain things in certain ways. Okay, so the first document is going to be covering, let me just get my pen ready for you. All right, let's do it in red. All right, so the first part of the code is going to be covering the economy, right? All the aspects of the economy. So to give some context here, I'll read this for you. Babylonia was located in the Fertile Crescent between Tigris and Euphrates River. This land was excellent for farming. Society depended on these crops for trade and to feed their people, okay? So there's 3 different codes specifically here that all go along with the economy. So let's read the first one. If anyone be too lazy to keep his dam in proper condition, it does not so keep it. If then the dam break and all the fields be flooded, then shall he in whose dam the break occurred be sold for money. Okay? And the money shall replace the corn which he has caused to be ruined. All right? If he be, and the next one says, if he be not able to replace the corn, then he and his possessions shall be divided amongst the farmers whose corn has been flooded. Right? And the last one, if any man without knowledge of the owner of a garden caused to fall, a tree in a garden, he shall pay half a mina in money. Okay? So let's take a look at these the questions now. So what were the occupations or jobs of the Babylonians mentioned in document 1? So one of the things were farmers, right? We also builder, right? Because of the person that built the dam. Okay. Good. So those are the 2 different jobs I would say. Who was punished for damage caused by flooding if a dam breaks? The builder, right? It's not the farmer, right? They said that the farmer, if his crops were destroyed, the builder who keeps the dam in proper condition is the one that's to blame. Based on document 1, identify one consequence for damaging someone else's property in Babylonia. Well, let's take a look. So damaging someone else's property, right? If were to fall into the garden, right? They say you have to pay a mina in money, right? You would have to pay a fine. Now, granted, if the dam breaks and destroys the crops, that's where it says, where if all the fields be flooded, then he who shall dam the break occurred be sold for money, and the money shall replace the corn which he has caused to be injured. So if people get injured or things like that happen, the person may be sold as a slave, and the money they make goes to fixing all the problems. Explain what this excerpt of the Code of Hammurabi suggests about the economy of Babylonia. So when you look at the economy here, all the things that are intertwined are focused on agriculture. All right, that's what's really important. It's about farming. Farming is the most important thing. Okay. So now let's move on to the next one. So now we're going to talk about social classes. All right. So let's take a reading here. So 199 says, if he put out the eye of a man's slave or break the bone of a man's slave, he shall pay 1/2 of his value. All right. Number 202 says, if one strike the body of a man higher ranked than he shall receive 60 blows from an ox whip in public. All right. And then 203, if a freeborn man strike the body of another freeborn man or equal rank, he shall pay 1 gold mina. All right. So let's take a look here. What is the difference between a freeborn man and a slave? Well, pretty simply, freeborn is free. Well, is free to do whatever they want. Is free to do anything they want. What about a slave? Slave is not, right? A slave, now maybe I'll write in a different color for you guys. Let's do blue. A slave is not free. forced labor, right? Good. So now, what is the punishment if a freeborn man strike the body of another freeborn man? So when you take a look, right, one freeborn man strike the body of another, of another freeborn man, then it says right here, you should pay 1 gold mina, right? So you're paying a fine. All right, so now next, what is the punishment if a man strike the body of a man higher rank than he? Oh boy, that's where it's bad. So if a man strike a body of a higher rank, then he receives 60 blows of an ox whip. Now, if you look up an ox whip, guys, it's pretty lethal, right? 60 blows of an ox whip. Ox whips are pretty lethal, right? All right, next one. How do the punishments differ if a man strike the body of another freeborn man or a man higher ranked than he? Well, which is more severe? Striking somebody of higher rank. Right? Striking somebody of a higher rank is a no-go, right? That is a problem and a half, right? So striking someone of a higher rank, you have much more severe. Much more severe for them. According to this document, was everyone equal in Babylonia? The quick answer is no. No, they aren't. All right, social class is really important, right? Okay. Next one, women, right? We're focusing on now the role of women and the relationship between them and their husbands. Let's take a read. Number 138 says, if a man wishes to separate from his wife, who has borne him no children, he shall give her the amount of her purchase money and the dowry which she brought from her father's house and let her go. So if she has not borne him, she has no children born from him, and he shall, so yeah, if a man wishes to do this though, if a man wishes to separate from his wife, who has not given him any children, he will then have to give her the amount of money she had in a dowry. Now a dowry is basically the amount of money in which the father, right, and I'll put this in maybe another color for you guys, right, a dowry is what the father, it's basically money, right? So it's basically money that the father gives to the daughter. Basically, a dowry is used, and you'll see a lot more in medieval times, but a dowry is used to help them kind of get ahead of life when they're married, okay? So a dowry is money given to the father. So basically what they're saying is that when the man separates from the wife, who has not given him any children, he has to give the amount of money in which the dowry is equal to and let her go. All right, 141 says, if a man's wife who lives in his house wishes to leave, plunges into debt, tries to ruin her house, neglects her husband, and is judicially convicted, if her husband offer her release, she may go on her way, and if he gives her nothing as a gift of release, if her husband does not wish to release her, and if he take another wife, she shall remain as a servant in her house. So this one's kind of a big one. So if a man's wife is trying to basically say, if a man's wife wants to leave, right, and she either plunges into debt, right, owes a lot of money, tries to ruin the house purposely, neglects her husband, I see these are all things, neglects her husband, or is judicially convicted, then if her husband wants her to leave, she may go and doesn't have to give her any money. However, this is the important one here, if he does not wish her to leave, then she must remain as a servant. Let's look at the next one. If she is not innocent, but leaves her husband and ruins her house, neglecting her husband, this woman shall be cast into the water. Saying if she's not innocent,
right, and all of these things, and wants to do, and she does all these things, she'll be basically thrown into the water. Okay. 148. If a man take a wife and she be seized by disease, if he then desire to take a second wife, he shall not put away his wife, who has been attacked by disease, but he shall keep her in the house which he has built, and support her as long as she lives. So this is an interesting one. So if a woman, the wife of a man, gets struck by disease, then and he desired to take on a second wife, he shall not put away his wife. So what he has to now do is keep her in the house and take care of her as long as she lives. So he could have a second wife, but he has to take care of the first one as long as she lives. So let's take a look at Law 141. All right, what happens if a woman wants to leave her marriage but her husband refuses to release her? According to 141, if he wants to keep her and she doesn't want to go, then she has to remain a servant, right? According to 138, what happens to a dowry if a man leaves his wife? Well, in 138, it says that if a man wants to leave the wife, then the man needs to provide money to the wife that was equal level to the dowry. So it returns to the wife. How do punishments differ for a man and a woman? Right? If a man wants to leave, then it's all fine and dandy, right? The only time it's not okay is if she's sick. So man has priority between the two. But there are some things that the woman does have, like as in you see in Rule 148, she does have protection if she gets sick, but majority of the time the man does have the majority of the benefits. Okay? All right, guys, that's it for me. Have a good one.